Well, Reverend Father, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great day to discuss this topic. Why, you ask? Because it's September 18th. Why is that such a great day to discuss this kind of stuff? The answer is because it's the feast of St. Joseph of Cupertino. Anybody want to show hands? Who knows who that is?
We know where Cupertino is.
St. Joseph of Cupertino. Yeah, the founder of Cupertino, California. Very good. No. But good try. The man gets an E for effort. Fails the class, but gets an E. All right, no, seriously, St. Joseph of Cupertino epitomizes a phrase, and I never touched on this in the original talk, but you'll understand the appropriateness of this day. He epitomizes in his life what are called the physical phenomena of mysticism. There's a phrase for you, the physical phenomena of mysticism. It's a $3 word which you'll now be able to use at any moment to impress the easily impressed. But what does it mean? It means the supernatural as opposed to preternatural. I remember I did say this at that talk, the difference between natural, preternatural, and supernatural. Natural, of course, is the things that we accept as regular and normal, outside of politics, of course. That wasn't nice. Preternatural is anything beyond that, from poltergeists to the demonic to the occult, anything bizarre. That's preternatural. Supernatural deals exclusively with the realm of the divine. And this is why Mary Baker Eddy healing your sickness through Christian Science is preternatural. St. Joseph of Cupertino, exemplifying the physical phenomena of mysticism, that's supernatural. Now, what were the phenomena in his case? He flew. And I don't mean in a plane. They called him the Flying Friar. He would float. And initially, his brethren, he was a Franciscan. You know, the Franciscans are a little odd anyway. But he was above and beyond the usual call of bizarrety. And initially, his superiors didn't appreciate it. But they got to the point to where his abbot, or not his abbot, is the protector of the monastery, whatever they called him, would tell him, go up there and get that out of that tree. And just go up and do it. Very strange, very peculiar. Look it up. I could spend a whole day talking about it, but I'm not going to. However, it is peculiar, it is strange, and that is why the 18th of September is a great day to discuss the seen, the unseen, and the flat-out strange, especially with a Catholic context. So, there is your intro. Beyond that, all I can say before we get into questions and answers, if you saw either the original lecture or if you've seen the video, or if you've bought the 8-track tapes, if you bought the 8-track tapes, then you're in the grip of the preternatural yourself, believe me. But at any rate, if you have, then you know that we went over a wide range of material. So today, I'm willing to answer questions and discuss anything that we covered and anything along the bizarre that you can think of, if think of it. The other thing I should mention is that since that lecture, Father Amorth, who was the exorcist of the Diocese of Rome, has died. I mentioned him. The other major known exorcist is Father Fortea. He's a Spaniard, and he's still very much with us at the moment. So, having said all of that, ladies and gentlemen, and without further ado, as they say in the trade, questions. Yes, sir.
Yes, a lot of people when they get close to the occult, it is usually the divination powers, psychics and whatnot that comes through demons, and it's preternatural in nature, and so it's deceptive in nature. Can you kind of elaborate on that? Because I've only heard a couple of discussions with Father Malachi Martin on that topic, but that's what draws people in, these psychics and whatnot that seem to have these powers, but they're all deception.
Well, see, there are a number of different things going on at once. in that question. The question, of course, relates to psychics and foretelling the future and so on. First and foremost, it is a very murky area, and you're right. We're all keen to know what's going to happen next. All right, but take for instance astrology. Now, as you may know, belief in astrology has waned and waxed amongst Catholics throughout history. But even in the Middle Ages, when people had a tremendous belief in it, and I'm talking about people like St. Thomas Aquinas now, not Joe Blow, what did they say? The stars impel, they do not compel. What is the major problem with fortune telling, doctrinally speaking? The idea that your future is foreordained and that you have no free will. Mars is in the ascendant, and so you can't help yourself. If you're a Scorpio like myself, you'll be dominant and overbearing and talkative. If you're a fire sign, of course, then you'll be sort of submissive and do as you're told. No. What they would say then, and this is talking about a period now when people had a tremendous belief in this, the stars impel, they do not compel. Now that's the major doctrinal problem. The idea that you have a future that is not dependent upon your free will. The Church condemns anything that denies your free will, including Lutheranism. Now, the Calvinism too. And that's an important thing to bear in mind. Secondly, the devil has always worked through lying wonders. This takes us back to the time of Simon Magus, where, as you remember, after attempting to purchase apostolic power from the apostles, where else would you get it? He then attempted to fly and flew until he was brought down to his death. The devil often works through lying wonders. But having said that, there's another set of phenomena, and that is the fact that people do have premonitions. People sometimes do dream dreams. I will make a terrible personal admission. I have occasionally dreamt scenes that have come true. It's true. And I'm sure a lot of us have. But they're never useful scenes. It's not like I've seen somebody holding the racing form and, oh, look, isn't that amazing? Parsons' Folly in the Third and Serenade. Oh, my. It never works like that. It's always something, persons, places, whatever I've never seen before. And then a few months later, oh, my gosh, there it is. I remember when I was in Marine boot camp, 6 months before I'd gone into it, I dreamt that I was in a barracks. I had no intention of going to the Marines at this point. And I was looking through a row of empty bunks to another, and there was a black guy on the other end. And his name, as I looked at him, I thought, that's Bowman. And then I woke up. I knew a Bill Bowman, but he was a white guy that ran a Catholic store, and I figured that's where I got the name. 6 months later, I was at Marine boot camp, and I was standing in the morning roll call. I looked across, and there was Bowman right there. Now, that happens to a lot of people, actually. But what does it mean? I don't know. I'll recommend a book to you, and I'll give you a bit of speculation. What's the book, you ask? It's called, I think, Occult Phenomena or something like that, by a Cistercian whose name has just come right out of my head. Dom. Ask me after Mass. That way I can check. But it's Occult Phenomena, I think, is the name of the book. And he's a Benedictine monk, very well known. A friend of mine was his secretary. He was a Benedictine or Dominican. A Benedictine or Cistercian. Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'll remember it. But it's the book for the Catholic viewpoint. What's that?
Is it like Alois?
Yes. Wiesinger. Yes. Alois Wiesinger. Thank you. That's exactly it. Alois Wiesinger. ALOISWIESINGER. Alois Wiesinger. It is the best book on the, shall we say, non-request for help from Satan kind of thing. A very strange example of this, and then I'll give you my speculation, but a very strange example of this, which you may have heard of, was the story of Bishop Lagny, who was a bishop in Transylvania, of all places, probably appropriate, but he was also the tutor of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand when Franz Ferdinand was a young fellow. Well, one night in 1914, he went to bed. He went to bed, and he had a dream. In his dream, he woke up. It was morning, and he went downstairs, and there on the silver platter where the bishop's mail would come, there was an envelope, black-lined, black-bordered, I should say, with Franz Ferdinand's coat of arms on it. And he cut it open, took out the card, and on one side there was a weird sort of moving picture showing the Archduke and his wife in a car getting shot. And on the other, in the Archduke's handwriting, was a letter to the effect of, with the date, Dear Bishop Lagny, I'm very sorry to have to tell you that my wife and I have been assassinated this day, Sarajevo. Your loving Franz Ferdinand. So he woke up. It was about 3 a.m. He was horrified. But he very quickly wrote the whole thing down, put it away, went back to bed. He woke up the next morning and went downstairs. To his immense relief, there was no mail on the silver plate. He went in for breakfast, and a bit later in the day, they got the news that the Archduke had been shot. So he went to check the little note he had written down, and he found something strange. He'd written an account of what he saw, and then he wrote down what was on the note. But what he had written on the note was in the Archduke's handwriting. He had imitated the Archduke's handwriting when recounting what was on the note in his dream. Also bear in mind that Franz Ferdinand and his wife were alive when he dreamt it. So what does this mean? Who knows? But as what's his name, Dickie Lee tells us, strange things happen in this world. But honestly, we perceive time as a straightforward motion, right? We're born, we live, we die. But we know that God himself is outside of time. When we say God knows the future, it doesn't mean he's like my great master Criswell and reads the tarot. No. He's outside of time and space because that's all creation which he made. And for him, everything is now. He said, if you remember, before Abraham was, I am. Now, for God, and thus in reality, time and space are mutable things. And Abbot Wiesinger suggests that perhaps, these flashes come to us because in some ways, somehow, and possibly in a natural way, this way some folk can just pick up playing music at the piano, we key into the reality of things. Perhaps a gift that was lost to us at the fall, but which some people have in remnant form. The thing with all this stuff, though, and it's very important to bear in mind, well, 3 things to remember. 1, there's nothing definitive on it one way or the other, and anyone who tells you they know exactly what the story is wrong. 2, we are not told about it in Revelation because it's not necessary for our salvation to know. Go through the Bible as much as you will, and there are no descriptions of the Indian tribes of North America or Papua. No description of the streets of Paris and London. Why? Not essential for our salvation. All that comes to us in Revelation, all that a Catholic must believe, is what is essential for him to be saved. What that leaves, however, is a huge gray and bizarre area that we sort of have to puzzle out, and which, as you rightly suggest, the devil sometimes takes advantage of, and which we, given our fallen nature, well, you know how it is. We tend to be more attracted to the demonic and the bizarre than we are to the holy and the extraordinary. They made a movie about St. Joseph of Cupertino, which no one remembers. They made The Exorcist, no one can forget. That's our nature, you see. We aspire to the heavens, but we're drawn toward hell. It's unfortunate, but it's the way we are. So I used to complain to my dad about things like this and say, well, it's your own fault. Came to an unfallen world. You don't like it? Next time come to an unfallen one. You won't have these problems. But anyway. So any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
There's various psychic mediums, but it comes to mind, I think, John Edwards and Teresa Caputo, who both claim to be Catholic. John Edwards said he said the rosary before he goes on stage. I've seen where Teresa Caputo, who has a reality show, has lectured in front of Catholic parishes. She's been on various TV shows talking about, being a Catholic and communicating with the dead, the currently dead. So what is the church's position on that? And when people claim to be Catholic or are Catholic and do this, especially in a public way, how should we think about it?
Well, the way we think about Teddy Kennedy. He claimed to be Catholic, voted that he never saw an abortion bill he didn't like. I mean, anyone can be Catholic or claim Catholic and do anything. John the 12th tried to sell the papacy 3 times and then laughingly pocketed the money and said, you can't sell the papacy, moron. He was the highest pontifical con man there's ever been, but a Catholic in good standing since he was the Pope. I mean, remember this important truth about ourselves. Any of us can fool ourselves into doing anything we want and tell ourselves we're good Catholics. We are masters of delusion. You've heard of a master of illusion like the Magic Castle? We're masters of delusion. And that's very important. Self-delusion is the key to positive thinking. Anyone who's having a positive thought will know that. But no, just because, well, again, the church forbids us to do that. That includes seances, it includes Ouija boards, it includes any attempt on our part to get in touch with the dead. Now, mind you, if you see something of that sort that appears to be dead, well, like the Purgatory Museum in Rome has tons of examples of, that's different. That's them reaching out to you.
Can you elaborate on that part?
No. Yeah. Good. I said it, that's it. Forget it, you get nothing. No. You'll have to excuse me, I'm a little powered this morning. The spirits are all around. The Purgatory Museum, I mentioned this at the lecture. I guess some of us either didn't go or didn't watch the video. But no, that's fine. I'm all right. I don't want you to feel guilty or singled out. Seriously, if you go to Rome, to the Church of Sacro Cuore del Suffragio, the Sacred Heart of the Suffrages, which is right on the Tiber, very close to Castel San Angelo, very close to the Vatican, one of the 2 Gothic churches you'll find in Rome, the other being really Gothic, Santa Maria della Sopra Minerva. That one is really Gothic. But Sacro Cuore del Suffragio was built in the late 19th century for the Missionaries of Charity, which are an order, Missionaries of the Sacred Heart, which are an order dedicated, as you might guess, to the Sacred Heart, but also to praying for the dead. Anyway, the founder of that church was a Monsignor Jouet, who is French. And he, for various reasons, went all over Europe looking for artifacts. Now, these are very particular artifacts. And they all have relatively similar stories. What happens is that somebody's dead. And at some future period, they appear to someone, close to them usually, and say, I'm in purgatory, I need X number of prayers, X number of masses, etc., etc. And the person looks at them and says, yeah, okay, that's nice, but nobody's going to believe me. And then they set the hand down and make a mark of some kind, usually burning. Purgatory fire, you see. It's not a pleasant place. So I remember in one case, I can see it in what's left of my mind, the individual was talking, said, no one will believe me. Put the hand down and said, well, that could be the devil. So drew the cross with his fingertip. And they've got various things, tablecloths, books, and so on. So we gathered these things from all over Europe and put them together in the collection that's there now. The House of Shadows is what they call it in Italian. It's not a big thing. You go into the church, there's the sanctuary, then you ask a sacristan after Mass, and they'll take you. It's in the hallway to the right. And it's this case. It's got all these bizarre things on it. There are about 3/4 more before Vatican II. After Vatican II, that sort of thing came into, shall we say, disfavor. And so what the order did was they went back and researched every single artifact. And what they ended up 20 years later putting back on display were the things that were simply indisputable. Now, interestingly enough, if you go to the fabulous city of Bratislava, Slovakia, you go to the cathedral, and in their treasury is a similar artifact from a fellow who came back, wanted prayers, and so on and so forth. And he got them, but I remember when I'd seen it, having been to the Purgatory Museum in Rome, I looked at the thing and I said, "Oh, I know what that is." And I told the guide, and he looked at me and he said, "I hadn't gotten to that yet." I said, "Well, now you know if you go to Rome, you can see a whole set." And he was happy to know that. And he told me, he said, somehow it feels better knowing that there are a lot more of these in Rome than that we've got the only one. But that area, I'm going to recommend another book to you. Ready? Sir Sean Leslie. Sean in this case looks like Shane. Shane. Sir Sean Leslie's Ghost Book. Or if you prefer, the Ghost Book of Sir Sean Leslie. Simply the best thing on the matter written from Catholic sources that you will find. But he tells a story in there. He tells a number, but the one that I find particularly interesting, and they're all very well documented, the ones he tells, it was of a priest in a church in England, Catholic priest, who his predecessor of some 30 or 40 years before had died. He got ill, went into hospital, and died. Well, he started appearing in the library of the rectory, which, as you can imagine, people found somewhat unsettling. And this went on for 30 or 40 years. Finally, a new priest comes in, and he looks at the thing when it appears to him and says, "In the name of Almighty God, what do you want?" And it pointed at a book and vanished. So he grabbed the book, he opens it up, and in there, in the book, was a list of masses that had been paid for, but never said, mass intentions, given to this priest, but then he got sick, went to the hospital, died. So what the new priest did was he said all those masses for those intentions, and he said a mass for the repose of his predecessor's soul, and the ghost, as they say, was never seen again. So we don't really know, except that purgatory exists, and we have certain things in the lives of the saints and all that. We don't really know how the whole thing works. Because again, it's not part of Revelation. We don't need to know. But we know, well, how do I put it? There was an English ghost story writer. He's definitely part of the patrimony. M.R. James. And M.R. James had been the provost of Eton College in England. But he was also a prolific writer of ghost stories. And he was asked at one point, "Would you really believe in this sort of thing?" And his response was, "Depend upon it, these things happen, but we do not know the rules." And that's very important to bear in mind. Yes, ma'am?
What are you supposed to do if you see one of these things?
Me, I would scream in horror. Oh, sorry. That slipped out. Well, what you do is you get your Ouija board. No, you don't do that. Frank, honestly, the first thing you do is throw holy water at it. Really and truly. You see anything untoward, throw holy water. That's why we have the sacramentals, ladies and gentlemen. And you should have one, scapular, St. Benedict medal, that kind of thing. But the church has two reasons for existing. One is to save souls, and the other is to drive off the dark. And her sacramentals do that. If you see something untoward or things start flying around your house, holy water. Now,
it's not anything like that. What if it's people you know that
even
have to ask you for things?
All the more reason to throw holy water at them. You don't know what happened. You don't know. Let me tell you, one of the things Sir Sean points out is that in the Middle Ages, when people thought about this stuff, they would say that those hauntings that appeared to have intelligence, because some of them are just Aunt Hepzibah walks through the blue room every other weekend at midnight, and you can throw things at her, you can jump up and down, make faces, does whatever she's doing, and she's gone. But then others appear to have an intelligence. of that kind of haunting. And even St. Thomas, makes that distinction. So we're not the first ones to think about these things. But the three sorts are damned souls, demons masquerading as damned souls, and souls from purgatory coming for help. Now see, if they're coming for help, that's one thing. And of course, a damned soul or a demon is not going to ask for masses. That's for sure. So throw holy water at it, and then hear what it has to say. But you can't know for sure. Not unless you're the Curé d'Ars and have the discernment of spirits. But at any rate, you write down everything that occurs, and if it's sufficiently bizarre, talk to a priest. If it's malevolent, well, this is what I tell people. There are usually 3 stages in these things. We've got a house it's got interesting things going on. Throw holy water first. One of 2 things usually happens if it's something malevolent. It stops or it gets worse. If it gets worse, then you should have the priest in to bless the place, which you should do anyway. You don't have to tell him why. One of 2 things will happen. It'll stop, or it'll get worse. If it gets worse, then you've got to tell the priest what the problem is. And that's when your house will need to be exorcised. It's easier getting a place exorcised than a person, but it still requires some sort of bureaucracy. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You? Yeah.
How does the church distinguish between that and mental illness?
Well, that's a good question, and the answer goes back to the preternatural. A person knowing languages that they a possessed person having languages that they couldn't possibly know is a good one. Physical reactions to holy things. You pour holy water on the person, and they suddenly break out in second-degree burns. But there are a lot of criteria. And that's why it's so difficult to get an exorcism done, because they've got to fit a ton. Yes, ma'am.
What if you're getting signs from a recently deceased relative that are not malevolent?
That are not?
Not bad.
Then you're getting signs from a recently deceased relative who's not bad. that aren't bad. In each case, I'll give you an example. When my father died, several weeks later, the weekend after, the night before the Assumption, my brother, a friend of ours, and myself had identical dreams about him.
Wow.
Which is very peculiar. But, and that was that. It's not like, usually that kind of thing doesn't require anything out of you. But you should redouble your prayers to their souls if you get that sort of thing done. Have a mass said for them. Usually, you should always presume they're in purgatory. They may not be, but if they're not, you know what? That's not wasted. If you have a mass said for Aunt Emma, and she's actually singing with the saints right now, or if, God forbid, she's frying, you know what? That the merits of that mass will go to someone in purgatory who needs them. So nothing's wasted. And you'll have made a friend for yourself whom you never even knew. Not bad having friends among the holy souls, trust me.
That man had a question.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, is there a region of the world that has maybe the highest percentage or the highest per capita of ghost sightings or haunted houses?
That's a good question. The answer is, I knew the Archdiocesan exorcist of Los Angeles. We had one once upon a time, back before we banished the devil forever. Why are you laughing? It's the city of angels. Fallen, but anyway. He was from Sri Lanka. I remember on one occasion he said to me, in this country, so few possessions. In my country, devil possessions all the time. All sorts of terrible things going on. In this, not so much. I only do 8 exorcisms last year. I thought, 8? 8? Anyway, but you will find that there tend to be more of these things where the faith is weakest.
I'm sorry, say that again. When the what?
I'm sorry?
When the what?
Where the faith is weakest. So in other words, have a second. In other words, I'm going to use a very politically incorrect phrase, but it's okay. I don't really care. No, well, why should I? No one's paying me. And by the way, speaking of political, they're ruining my birthday this year with their lousy election. So I can say whatever I want. You know, when I was born, JFK and Nixon upstaged me. Anyway, I digress. So the thing is that, I'm sorry, what was the question again?
You were saying where the faith is weak. That's usually where there's hauntings, right?
Right.
Okay.
And I'm a little deep. Say again?
Where you were telling him where
Yeah.
the faith is weak, I think?
Right, where the faith is weakest. Thank you. All right, I'm back on track. Anyway.
And you were going to say something politically incorrect.
I was. Heathen countries. Thank you. Heathen countries. I told you it was politically incorrect, especially when this country is as heathen as they come. Oh, that was really incorrect. Anyway, but no, I mean, for instance, and you needn't just bag on the Indians in India and the Senegalese. Think of New England under the Puritans. You think there wasn't witchcraft at Salem? There was. They killed the innocent, which is typical of Calvinists, but oh, come bloody on. That just was uncalled for. I mean, really. And on a Sunday? Heavens. Anyway. No, but but seriously, where the faith is weakest, the devil is strongest. And that is true of countries. It's true of people. You know, one of the questions I was asked subsequent to the lecture, and it's a very good one, why would God allow possessions? Why would God allow demonic possession? That's a fair question, isn't it? Especially when each of us is guardian angel. Why would he do that? And the answer is very simple. Apart from the fact that often enough the person or somebody around them, not necessarily the person, has done something to let in the dark, it is a potent teaching moment for everybody around it. That all of this is real. That this isn't pretend. This isn't some abstract thing, this faith of ours. It's real. It's real the way the income tax is real. Yes, that kind of reality. Oh, yes. And we are such people that we forget. We forget that. And I mean, stop and think, but take ourselves as sterling examples of shining Catholicism. What's the hypostatic union? Oh, that's Jesus' divine and human natures and how they connect. That's the hypostatic union. The Holy Trinity is 3 in 1 and 1 in 3. That's true, but they are such extraordinary realities. And we get used to them. We take them for granted. We don't even think about them. They just, our Lord was born of a virgin who herself was conceived without any sin. That's astonishing. And yet, as I say, the good stuff, because of our nature, the good stuff does not get our attention like the bad. And that's why he allows it. Yes, sir.
A question. In Mexico or in other countries, I have like Santa Muerte. What do you think about the folk religions of these countries?
Well, that's a good question.
Saints, how they'll pray to like one soldado for like a drug run or a drug hit.
Good question. Santa Muerte, we could take it further. Santeria, voodoo, Methodism, all those. John Wesley was not a voodoo priest, thank you very much. Anyway, the thing is that all of these sorts of religions, it's a funny thing about them, and this is where things get sort of foggy. Before the council, I don't want to bag on the council, but I mean, this is an objective reality, and despite being a Catholic, I do feel that at times we have to be objectively real. Before the council, voodoo and Santeria and these things were on the wane. Slowly but surely. Partly, to be honest, because the church targeted them, but also because they used them to some degree as a preparatio evangelium. Instead of offering up rum and a dead chicken to Baron Samedi, whom you venerate as John the Baptist, why don't you pray to John the Baptist? And forget Baron Samedi, because they already had the idea. But after the council, the missionaries in a lot of these places began to downgrade the cultus of the saints. Very few of you here, I think, were cradle Catholics after Vatican II. I was. And at that time, I will tell you, there was a very massive assault on praying to the saints. And it wasn't just here. There were a lot of reasons for it. Part of it was to seem more acceptable to the Protestants. You know, if that's what they wanted, they should have dressed better. But anyway, sorry, that slipped out. But that had the effect in those places of strengthening those kinds of religions. Why? Because the intercession of the saints does bring effects. And if I tell you, don't pray to St. John the Baptist anymore, and you know that it's always worked, you'll end up worshiping Baron Samedi. And it may be your fault, but it's mine too. So Santa Muerte, you know, there's a big crisis in the church in Mexico of faith, and there's a big crisis in the state of Mexico in all sorts of other things. You put the two together and you get Santa Muerte. You have a second, because I've called on you before. Did you have your hand up? No, all right, fine. You did, yes. He's in front of you, then you, I promise. Yes, sir.
You kind of touched on it, but pre-Vatican II, souls appearing to the faithful, like, please say Mass for me. Mm-hmm. You know, even St. Faustina had that happen to her. But does that not happen as much, or it happens still, but nobody's recording it or cares?
I think the latter is probably truer. It's still happening, but nobody really cares. Well, some people do. We're here. But no, I mean, there has been an attempt, and I'm using this word, which can be used in a very decent way, but at the moment I'm using it in the worst way possible. There was a very strong attempt, and not just after the council, but predating the council by some decades, to quote-unquote rationalize our faith. Well, the problem is not that there's anything wrong with human reason. It's simply that human reason doesn't cover reality. It covers what we need it to cover. It's a tool. That's all it is. Reason is a tool. It allows us to do things. Reason will bring you as far as realizing that you must have been created by somebody. Reason will let you know that there's a right and a wrong. Reason will let you know that you shouldn't beat children whom you haven't even met yet. Reason will tell you these things. But it won't tell you about the Trinity. It won't tell you about the sacrifice of the Mass. It won't tell you anything like that. And it is also usually not helpful in things outside your experience or the experience of your group. Now, I'll tell this little story because it's, I don't know, because I feel like it, but also because it speaks to the limits of reason and the way we fool ourselves in our use of reason. And those of you who have heard the story were there the other night, but it bears repeating. When I was young, there was a columnist in the LA Times called Jack Smith, whom the older among you may remember. I know I do. And Jack Smith didn't believe in anything. He was a total rationalist, according to himself. He didn't believe in God, didn't believe in gold. Well, he believed in gold, but he didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in nothing. And back in '83, in Torrance, California, there was a celebrated poltergeist occurrence. And they had parapsychologists down from UCLA, and it was very exciting. It was on the news, and so on and so on. So Jack Smith writes a column about it. He says, this is all nonsense, it's drivel, these people are insane, they're stupid, this kind of thing can never happen. So, and this is where Jack Smith won my undying love. The man who owned the house wrote him a letter. And he said, basically, dear Mr. Jack Smith, you're so smart, you know everything and stuff. You come down here, you sit in my living room, and you tell me what's going on, because, like, you know it all. And he published the letter, and he said, I'm not going down there. Because if I do, and it turns out to be true, I will have to completely reorient my philosophy of life, and I am too old to do it. I read that, I said, absolutely. I'm for Jack Smith. He had the courage to get out there and say, you know what, I'm a phony. Deal with it. But reason as Jack Smith admitted, will take you only so far. And in trying to ignore this kind of thing, we've made a terrible mistake. It's interesting that the Dominican church near my house in Eagle Rock apparently get called on a great deal for this sort of stuff. And one of their priests talked about it at some length in one of his sermons. The fact that he vanished in a puff of smoke immediately after he finished was strange, but no, he didn't actually. He ended up getting a parish, which is very close to that. But he did go on at some length about the various calls that they've had to make in this sort of area. And I do think, especially with younger priests and younger Catholics, reality will always win over a view of the universe based upon whatever you want to base it on. Reality always wins. The Catholic faith is reality. Now, like your stated friends who want to call themselves Catholic but are busy conjuring the devil to bring them diamond rings or whatever, you can do whatever you like. You can say whatever you like. Doesn't matter. Reality will win. These things happen. And the church is forced to address them. Back before The Exorcist came out, there was a great deal of talk in certain elevated theological circles about whether we could get rid of the whole notion of Satan at all. Yes, I'm old enough to remember that. So the Holy Office had to come out with a decree reminding us that Satan is real and exists. And then The Exorcist came out about a year after that, and people wondered if the author of The Exorcist was in touch with Rome. But anyway, so it's a roundabout way of answering your question. The truth of the matter is, sure, these things are a constant. They're always happening. But don't forget, too, if you yourself go through something like that, the first thing you're going to want to do is rationalize it out of the way, because they're very unpleasant to think about or to live with. Sir, I promised.
Just I wanted to elaborate from my personal experience. I was a cradle Catholic, I'm a cradle Catholic, but I managed to fall away, and because I never truly understood the presence of Christ in the Eucharist, nor did I truly understand the sacraments, I was looking for a substance elsewhere. And so I ended up becoming initiated in a Masonic order. I ended up dabbling with all these New Age things. And ultimately, I just realized that it had absolutely nothing, that it was just a big lie, a big con, a deception, because ultimately what I was doing was I was substituting the substance of Christ as being the core of everything and putting myself there and worshiping myself.
Which is always the great temptation. And speaking of great temptations, I am tempted to talk a lot longer, and it's 10:52. So I'm afraid we must call the proceedings to a screeching halt. I'm going to confession. Don't got no time for you all. Thank you so much. God bless you all, ladies and gentlemen.